Hi, I'm Laura Overton, and I'm really thrilled to be able to be chairing this session today. Before we start, can I just ask, with a show of hands, does anyone in here have a challenge with engaging their learners? Put your hands up. Put your hands up. Please note, anyone who hasn't got their hands up, when we do more interaction later, they've got the answers. All right? So I think possibly we might be in the right room for this session today. So welcome to everyone. There are definitely seats at the front. And we want to be interactive today. We want to give you a lot of opportunity to talk to each other and to think and to reflect, because your learners may not be the same as the learners in the projects that we're going to be talking about today, but you are going to be able to take away a new perspective if you kind of open your minds a little bit. Look at your learners, your challenges through the lenses of our lovely friends here today, Louise and Sarah, who are going to be sharing some of their perspectives. So I'd like to encourage you to be open-minded and to be looking at your situation through their eyes. What would they see if they were looking at your challenges right now? And we'll be coming back to that a little bit later. So on your tables, because we are going to be talking to each other, what I would like you to do is to be able to describe in a few words to your partner, to the people sitting next to you, what do you think a motivated and confident learner will look like? How would you describe your learners in your organization? Yes, thank you, sir. You can stand up, absolutely. So how would you describe this marvelous gentleman over here if they were working in your organization as confident and motivated learners? So turn to each other and let's just kind of brainstorm a few ideas, a few goals that we have for our learners. Go, you may speak now. You have permission. Okay, so now you've got to know each other. Who would like to share a few words? We're going to call our motivated and confident learner Graham. So thank you, Graham. And so how would we describe the Grahams in our organization if they were motivated and confident? If I know your name, watch out. Julian, what did you have on your table? Just a quick few words.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Laura. Supported by your manager.
Supported. Thank you.
And encouraged.
Thank you. Supported and encouraged. Did anyone else have that? Well, good one to start. What about on this table? Who has got a confident and motivated Graham in their workforce, and what do they look like?
I would say they would be curious, self-motivated, and obviously kind of that they have a kind of purpose as to why they wanted to learn, so clear of what they were trying to get out of it.
Fantastic. So we've got supported, encouraged, curious, motivated, purpose. I've only done 2 tables. I'm clearly not going to be able to get around absolutely everyone. Has anyone got anything different to some of those words that we've got over here? In fact, Graham himself. Oh, in fact, let's have a look.
Someone who retains it, so they enjoyed it, obviously, as was mentioned, and then they've retained it, and they can reuse that information.
Brilliant. So someone's actually using what they're learning, so that makes them more confident. It builds confidence, doesn't it? So thank you so much for that. Graham.
So I had impatient in the sense they don't want to wait for someone else to fix their problems for them, and a challenger, someone that's not happy with today.
So somebody who actually wants to innovate, ticking into that curiosity, wants to dig in, wants to get more, to be able to do their work in their work environment and to be able to challenge maybe the status quo. Oh, who likes managing that kind of person? But there's a challenge in its own right, which we won't go into today. Anyone, any new other words to describe confident, motivated Graham on this table?
I think that we said engaged, actively asking questions, and empowered as well.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you. So we've got a lot of words here. We've got curious, engaged, motivated, purposeful, challenging, innovators, supported, encouraged. How many people have got learners like that in their organization right now? If you'd like to just put their hands up. Thank you so much. Again, look out for these people on the table. Generally, do we think that there is a gap between the engaged learners that we were talking about earlier and these confident and motivated people? Put your hand up if you think there is a gap. Again, we're in the right place, ladies, and you have been spending a lot of time working with learners, looking at innovation to connect and engage and transform lives, haven't you? So let's hand over to Louise and Sarah. Thank you.
Oh, there we are. Very good. It's really super to be here. Sarah and I work for an independent charity called UFI, VocTech Trust. Have a Google, you'll find us. And our focus is on how technology, learning technology and digital tools can help people get the skills they need for work. And as a charity, our focus is on those learners who are furthest away from learning. And that could be for a huge number of reasons. It could be personal, it could be because of where they live, it could be because of the sector they're in or the level of skills that they have. And these learners are often neglected or overlooked in mainstream provision, and through grant funding, through partnerships, and also through ventures investments, we support innovation and how technology can really help make sure that everyone is included in developing their skills. You know, and why is that so important right now? I imagine, you know, you don't need me to tell you, you know, we're facing a skills crisis in the UK at the moment, so we've got immediate shortages and economic challenges, and we've got preparing for industries in transition, whilst our own industry in L&D is also in transition through digitisation. So we need to support the skills for an ever-changing economy, but this is against the backdrop of a persistently low level of adult engagement in lifelong learning. So yes, there are motivated and engaged learners, but the statistics from the Learning and Work Institute, it's about 65 to 70% persistent level of lack of engagement in lifelong learning. So how are we going to meet the challenges of upskilling and reskilling when we're faced with this massive challenge around engagement in lifelong learning? And that's why for us, motivation and confidence to learn is really important, because the only way we're going to achieve the goals of our organisations and of the economy is to bring everyone with us in this upskilling and reskilling journey. So we know that tech can provide learning, but providing it isn't enough. So the things we want to explore here is how tech and digital tools can really help shift that dial, can open up access to learning, can help build learner confidence and improve those outcomes for individuals. I've lost my notes, bear with. And all these challenges, they need motivated and engaged learners. And what we've learned from what we do, and the 250 projects we've supported, is we've noticed that learner engagement is absolutely critical to building learning and development that helps engage everyone in learning. So we have a bit of a question. You're getting from Laura, a bit of a hint. This is going to be a highly participative session. So through the high-tech mode of raising your real hand, rather than maybe the hand on Zoom or Teams, we'd really like to know at what point in the learning process do you really proactively engage your learners? So who, as a matter of course, engages their learners in designing a programme? Very good. Who involves them in post-programme evaluation? Do any of you not involve your learners at all? Ah, phew. So I'm going to hand over to Sarah, who's going to talk a little bit about what we've learned from the projects we funded around engaging learners and why that's important and how it happens.
Thanks, Louise. Oops. And now I'm going to hope you can hear me. Okay. One of the biggest things that we've learned is to engage upfront, to understand your learners. I mean, you probably, or should, understand the organisational problem that you're aiming to solve, but to create effective learning, you need to understand your learners and get under the skin of what motivates and engages them, because you need to do that. Oops, sorry, I can't handle my own tech. That's all right. Because good design is what links the organisational goals to the motivations of your learners. And it's good design that put these two things together. And there's plenty of research out there that shows that good design just makes the whole thing more effective. It increases completion rates, it increases persistence, and it increases attainment. Now, often with the projects we're funding, learning design is quite a new concept. We're often funding projects which are working out in the community with groups of learners which are hard to reach. So we are doing quite a lot of kind of training and encouragement in what is good practice. And one of the things that we've seen that really works is to encourage people to use the double diamond process. And a lot of you will be familiar with this, but believe you me, this is brand new to a lot of people out there. So just to say, for those who don't know, this is based on the Design Council's design methodology. Because, as we see for a lot of people who apply to us, that most learning projects start in the middle. They think they know what the problem is, and they design or they purchase a solution that promises to fix it. And, you know, that might work sometimes. If you've got learners who've got complex need or a history with not engaging, you've got to go a lot further than that and a lot deeper. So while this process looks linear, it actually isn't. It's iterative in response to the findings of each stage. And the reason it's two diamonds is because they represent two different ways of thinking. It's the process of going widely or deeply, which is divergent thinking, and then taking focused action, which is convergent thinking. I'll whip through this very quickly. So, discover, that's where you help people understand rather than simply assume what the problem is, which means going out and speaking to people, finding out, spending time with the people affected by the issues. During the define phase, use the insight gathered from what you've discovered to help you actually define the challenge, and probably in a different way. And in the develop phase, you're encouraging people to give different, once you've got a clearly defined problem, you're encouraging people to give different answers and to seek inspiration from elsewhere. Co-design, and delivery is obviously just that. It's when you're putting all that together and actually making your solution. So that's the theory. If you don't know about it, go and look it up. There's masses of it on the internet. Really well worth thinking about as a simple design methodology. And I just wanted to show you a couple of designs of examples of how this has worked in practice. So this is Whammy Tab. This is a project that we funded. And they provide training and qualifications to the waste industry. So where they started, they said, well, there's fewer operatives taking up training and qualification in the waste industry. And they made this assumption that's because reduced adult training budget, logistical burden of training staff during working hours. So they said, okay, all right, what we'll do is we'll create some online training packages. So far, so good. So we funded a project with them, and we absolutely encouraged them to use the double diamond method. So what they did, we encouraged them to go out and do a discovery phase. They did staff interviews, they did some shadowing, they set up an advisory group. And what they discovered, once they delved down, is that cost was an issue, but the bigger problem was the cultural view. That staff had no confidence in training. And in addition to that, there were other barriers. There were language barriers, there were peer attitudes. People would take the mick out of people who went on training. You know, This is not a nice corporate set of learners. You know, these are quite difficult people to deal with. So how do they handle this? They explored ideas about how to do non-classroom based training options to make them fun and particularly reduce the time that was involved. And they delivered a couple of prototype gamified modules. So the big insight was to the my next slide. Sorry, go back. So the big insight was about learners' attitude to learning. That was the key to it. They hadn't realised, you know, how negative their learners felt about learning, and secondarily, the language and the literacy barriers that stood between learners and actually making that learning effective. And they wouldn't have known any of that if they hadn't actually gone out and really done some deep consultation with their learners. And the result of that is that the training developed was very different from the normal kind of, you know, click next to continue linear online learning. Instead, what they had was very visual, short, gamified bits of learning, which then absolutely tapped into and meshed with the motivations of their learners. How am I doing, Laura? Have I got time for another example?
And then we'll kind of have a look and see what we do with the information.
All right, okay, let's do another quick example. Front Lounge, I love this project. It's a really interesting project. It's run out of one of the poorest bits of Dundee. And this was this is a project which effectively encourages single parents who have multiple problems, but where they all gathered together is they had a project to teach people sewing, and sewing skills which then led into careers in textiles, in the fashion industry. And this started during lockdown, and they created online content so that young unemployed families could carry on with the sewing project. Content was pretty unstructured. When I had a look at this thing, and any learning designer would go, okay, not quite sure what we're doing here. And they had this kind of assumption that young people would just sign up for 6 months of this stuff. And you think, no, I know you like this project, but really, is people really going to sign up and do, you know, kind of, people live quite chaotic lives. Do you really think they're going to sign up for something which is, you know, 6 months regular? So what do? They did deep interviews with learners. They discovered what their insights were. They discovered that people were committed to it, but there were all sorts of difficulties, and learners needed flexibility. So they developed ideas around content format and delivery, which were much more flexible. And they shortened their courses to 3 months, but 3 months with lots and lots of flexible support. And their big insight was that learners' confidence levels were still dropping post-pandemic. And so they still needed loads of support. Now, this didn't change particularly their approach to the tech, but it made sure that they had a much more flexible approach, which combined a lot of support. So that's about how you can use design to link. You need to understand the motivations of your learners in order to design the right program, and hopefully some positive examples of how that was done.
Brilliant. Before we go any further, has anyone got any specific questions or observations of where you've done this as well in your own organisation? Because this linking into motivation, a lot of the research that I did directly with learners actually, well, learners in the workplace, they just wanted to do their jobs faster, smarter and better. And now we've actually got stronger kind of skills and career motivations as well. And are we actually doing this design in this way? So Graham, hello. Just give us a quick example of where you might be doing this. Thanks.
Sorry, my question was slightly on the sidelines of that. In thinking from the previous session this morning, again this session now, in terms of if you work within an organisation, for you stepping in from the outside, every time's new, isn't it? Getting their deep dive. For us, do we think of every single project in this context? Do we have to keep going back out, or do we just go out to our learners, figure out where the barriers are, what's challenging, what the cultural problems are, all of that other stuff once, and then keep kind of just revisit it? But rather than thinking about projects, think about the all.
Thank you.
I mean, you're absolutely on something. This is a cultural piece, and I think if you're doing something new with different learner groups, so a lot of these projects, they're not engaging with, huge numbers of people, but they're really understanding a small handful of learner needs and challenging those assumptions. So I think what we've seen, some of our projects have evolved this into the use of personas, and then what you start then doing is keeping an eye on those personas, and the bit we'll come back to at the end is it's about the assumptions piece on the learning design and the trainer's point of view. So, if you've got a real issue about trust with a certain group of learners, you probably know the first output that you get from them isn't maybe going to be, completely honest. So you might want to go back to them. But it is quite different. It is quite a shift. But I'd say, really think about your different groups of learners, and then maybe if you're in a bigger organisation, the evolution into personas might be a useful tool, because you guys have got to manage this effectively and within budget and time as well, haven't you?
A lot of what Sarah was sharing with us is actually some of the practice that I kind of surfaced when I was doing research into high-performing learning organisations. That real ability not only to align to what the business needs, but to align to what the individual needs, and the kind of tips and techniques that you've given us really does have a knock-on effect. It correlates back, in fact, to employer motivation, engagement with learning, and also much broader and wider in terms of their attention, the way they feel connected and supported in the organisation, the way they feel curious, and the fact that they're working to purpose. But these are techniques that often we don't use. I'd like us to maybe, if we may, just move on to this issue about confidence, because what you're talking about is tapping into something being relevant to the individual, relevant to their situation, and therefore connected to motivation. And, we are going to ask you to do an exercise at the end of this, so build up these little building blocks for yourselves. I'd like on the tables for us to discuss about what impacts people's confidence. And what I'd like you to do is just individually just write down a couple of things, or think about just for about 30 seconds about what saps the confidence of individuals so that they're not those curious, challenging, engaging type of individuals in the workplace. And then just think about that for a moment, and then I'm going to give you permission to talk again to each other. And let's look at those confidence sappers. Take the energy down a little bit. And if you've had a moment, if you like to chat, go straight in. You have permission to talk to your neighbours. Let's just talk about what we think might sap the confidence of learners in our organisation right now. You have permission to speak. So can we have a little bit of feedback maybe from the room of the things that sap confidence? Maybe I'll go onto this table here first. What did we think sapped confidence in our learners? Anyone like to share a few words?
Thank you. We've got a list. We've got a list. So we talked about things like lack of autonomy. So certainly I work for a bank, and we've got jobs that have got really high autonomy over time, so that people can pretty much suit themselves and be quite self-motivated in terms of when they learn, versus other jobs where they've got very low autonomy over their time. We talked a little bit about previous experiences that might have been either good or bad, or if people have got previous experiences at school or with exams, or the learning effectiveness hasn't been good in the past. We talked about things like fear of failure or judgment in kind of group settings, diversity as well. So, we talked about that, and just that kind of whole kind of experience with tech and digital skills, because obviously more and more learning is moving online and more virtual, and how that could impact people if they just didn't have the confidence to use those tools.
Wow. So that's quite a list. It is. So we had diversity, we had Oh my goodness, my memory's going now. Diversity was clearly one. What they know, give me. Here we go. Give us the word.
Confidence, autonomy.
Confidence, autonomy, past experiences, fear of failure, fear of exposure, maybe vulnerability as well. Did anyone else have any of those words? Yes. Okay, thank you for capturing. Hello.
I actually just wanted to ask about one of your keywords. What did you mean when you said diversity, and how does that impact motivation?
Right, so that basically what you were saying there was if you need to have the confidence to be able to speak up in a room of people who may be different to you in some way. I get that. You know, whether it's gender diversity, whether it's neurodiversity, there's such a wide range of different ways that make us different. And creating spaces for all of us to be able to have a voice, I think, is so important to be confident in that. So thank you. Thanks for the clarification. What about on this table? I know you were chatting hard, and it clearly wasn't about escaping the room. So who would like to share some thoughts about what saps our confidence?
Yeah, I think we said very much the same as you said, the possibility to do mistakes, and we said feedback, and we said, I don't remember everything we said. We said a lot of things, but very much the same. Please fill in.
We talked about difficulty levels of the content, so if you're trying to take a course that's too hard for you. So talk about difficulty levels. So if you come in and you do something and it's not pitched at your level, then that might be very off-putting straight away. So sort of something that builds up to increase your skills.
I've certainly been in the online learning industry for quite a while, and actually it's incredible the number of people who do a program that's either too hard or too easy and say, well, we told you e-learning didn't work. You know, so I think it's really important for us to remember. But I think we've got time for just one or two other words that kind of sap confidence here. Would you like us to go back to Graham? Hey, let's go back to Graham.
The first one out of the blocks was limiting beliefs. So things like horrible learning styles persisting and people saying, I don't learn like that, even before they've seen the materials. And I think the other one we got in there was imposter syndrome, people not feeling like they're in the right place, doing the right things, all that kind of stuff. And lovely one popped out in the middle, overconfidence, so the opposite of all of this. I don't need this because I'm awesome already.
It's the idea of overconfidence I've seen a lot at myself, particularly studying the L&D industry. There's a real sense of being able to get to trained incapacity, which is basically when you're really good at your job, you're actually far less likely to be able to be agile and embrace new ideas. So some great thoughts there. You've been working with learners who are not confident, who've been disadvantaged from the get-go. So have you got tips for us? Have you got some case studies, Sarah, in that little deck of yours?
I have. It's not easy. It's just not easy. So there's no one magic simple answer. So I can tell you a whole load of anecdotes. I could probably tell you a few stories about failure as well, but maybe we'll leave those on one side for the moment. So what I think we've learned when it comes to confidence and motivation, that it's context that is critical. And that's what I was kind of indicating to this table over here, who also came up with some really interesting things, is that I think confidence issues often remain invisible. And they're not always obvious because we see the response and not the reason. So you've really got to dig a bit deeper to actually find out, is this confidence or is this something else? I mean, for example, you may hear learning new skills, what's the point? That's the pink selection of this diagram selected at random. What's the point? Can't see the point of it. I've done a couple of projects with national numeracy, And they used to hear this all the time, as people say, can't see the point. Why do I need to learn maths? You know, but that actually what that disguised was loads of complex feelings about fear and inadequacy, resulting in lack of confidence. But what you heard was can't see the point. But interestingly enough, when you looked at people's motivations, helping kids with their homework actually was enough of a motivator for people to be able to then say, oh yes, I do see the point, and tapping into that motivation then allowed us via the programme to help them gain their confidence through, and we tried all sorts of things. We had a sort of confidence boosters, we had real people telling real stories, but it was all linked in through their motivation, which is quite simple, to help their kids with their homework. And that really, really worked. So it's often, what I'm trying to get at here is it's not obvious. You have to dig deeper. I mean, let's look at another one which came, which comes up quite a lot. You've got to have the confidence to try. And sometimes that can make you look daft. And it's also what you were saying is about having a safe place to fail. But in order to be able to fail, you've got to, that takes quite a lot of confidence to do that in public, you know, because most people don't really want to admit they can't do something. So if you think on how, e-learning can obviously offer you a safe place to fail in private. Think how Duolingo works. You know, you can go and practice speaking with an appalling accent to yourself in the privacy of your own bedroom. You don't have to expose your appalling accent in front of other members of the classroom. So a safe place to fail in privacy can often get over those feelings of making a real, not wanting to learn because you make an idiot of yourself. The other thing that we come across is people lack confidence because they've had a really bad experience of the education system. And they may not admit that to you. But once you become aware of it, then you've got to start thinking about, okay, well, how can I make this different from school? This isn't school. We're not all sitting in a classroom together. We're not using that kind of didactic approach. But you won't know any of this unless you ask the right questions and gain their confidence to find out actually what is actually impacting, what is causing these responses. Can I tell you a story about First Step Trust? Okay, First Step Trust got a lot of time for this organisation. They deal with people who have long-term mental health problems, low levels of literacy, numeracy, all sorts of problems. People who have people who've, a lot of them have been in prison, come out, go in and out of prison. History of repeat offending. So they made this assumption that a lot of these people are the sort of people I was talking about just before, who have had a really bad experience of education. So they want to do something differently. So they had this assumption, we're going to help them use immersive technology, VR helmets. And what they proposed to do is create a virtual garage. It's great because they got sponsorship from Halfords for learners. So where learners would demonstrate competency on doing things like changing a tyre, various other kind of simple mechanical things, by undertaking practical tasks in a virtual environment. So they did our double diamond thing. They tried out the immersive tech, and what they discovered is that learners can really be helped to gain qualifications through the use of assistive technology because it provided a safe place to fail. Because they weren't making a fool of themselves in the classroom. A lot of them, you know, these are great big blokes, but they're still really worried about making an idiot themselves and showing that they couldn't do this stuff in front of their mates. And using VR tech allowed that, got round that problem. And their big insight was about confidence. they realised that by giving users the right environment and removing worries like fear of being watched, it just increased their success rate. Using the double down method just allowed them to explore all the tech options a lot better. But fundamentally, the discovery phase just helped them to reinforce what they already believe, that tech can help, but when you've got people with significant challenges like this, it's the support to get them over feelings of anxiety. It's the human support. And it is now, interestingly enough, they're actually starting to get people into employment, which is absolutely brilliant, because these are the people who are the furthest from employment that you can think of at the beginning. Okay.
Uh-huh.
So that's a little bit about First Step Trust. Did you want to?
Let's get to work.
Yeah.
Let's get to work. We've had a lot of examples here today about design, what we're doing, what we're not doing. On the table, I think your insights have been as valuable as our insights from our contributors here today. So we want to keep that flowing, we want to keep that going, because we want to come here today about talking about how do we create confident and motivated learners. We've looked at what we want to get to, we've looked at what stops people from getting there. We've had a few ideas from the front that says, you know, let's think about design, let's think about discovery, let's think about putting the learner first, let's think about understanding, designing, applying technology in the right way, into the right process, in the learning process. Lots of ideas. You've also had a lot of ideas from the sessions before. So we would like you on the table to do a little exercise for yourselves, and maybe it's in 2s and 3s on the table, to say, okay, of your current practice, what can you do differently in order to support a motivated and engaged learner? So it's really easy for us as learning professionals, I know I've seen it in the data, to blame everything else that's going on around us. It's always the manager's fault, it's always the learner's fault, it's always the industry's fault, it's always somebody else's. But what can we do in our own practice that will help us bring our individuals one step further to being confident and motivated? So on the tables, I would like you to discuss, is there one thing in your practice today that you think you might need to stop or put a hold to, or just be less reliant on? Graham gave us learning styles earlier. Thank you for that one. We'll put that one up there. But also, what do you think from the conversations today and on the table that we perhaps need to start doing more of? And what is it that we're currently doing that we're like, oh my God, I hadn't realized how powerful that was. I'm really going to make sure I dig in. So that is the exercise on the table. We'd like to capture it if those of you who've got access and are willing to use their phones or their iPads or laptops to pop a little sticky note up on the Jamboard. So you can see it's a little bit color coordinated. If you haven't got access, we'll walk around and we can pop it up there for you so that we can see in the room practically, what do we need to stop, start, and continue in order to get more motivated, confident Grahams in our workforce? So, please start the conversation, and please connect to the Jamboard, and let's see the amazing wisdom that's in this room. You have permission to talk to each other now. So we've got a few ideas starting to come through after the interesting learning curve that I had after having to redo the things on the Jamboard, given the fact that I didn't set it up. So thank you for those who've connected and engaged with this process. What do we need to stop? Oh my goodness, I love this. Stop blaming external factors. Ooh, nasty there, but so true. We can make such a difference. You know, the organisation I head up right now are learning change makers. We're there to make a difference in the world and to take on the stuff that we can take on in smart ways there. So love that one there. Encouraging learners to make mistakes and say it's fine. Can I ask you a question? Do you encourage yourselves in that space? Do you allow yourselves to try and experiment and make mistakes? Because if you're struggling, then you'll appreciate how much your learners are struggling as well. So what's needed by you to make you feel safe to make mistakes? So I'll just throw that one out there. Continue to iterate, continue to experiment. Some really interesting stuff there. Just for the sympathy vote, I was working on a workshop this morning between 5 and 7 a.m. this morning, where we were looking at exactly this issue of iteration and confidence building, and people there had been doing lots of experiments within their L&D teams, and those experiments were suddenly, they had permission to do it, because we were on this program where we're all together, we're all learning together, and clearly you can see as leaders we were not experts in this stuff, and we were able to model that. So how can you model that? I think that's really important. Get out and consult. Consult seems heavy. Just be curious. Stefan's talking to us later about curiosity. It is the hidden killer skill that we need in order to combat our timing there. And what we've got there as well, we've got continue iterating. We've had that one as well. Let's start having more engaging trainers and consultants who are good at storytelling. So let's build our own skills. Let's become motivated and curious and confident learners. So I think we've got a lot, this stuff works. What you've come up with, when you actually put it into practice, it was so worth getting up this morning. The power it gave people when they suddenly start to see what it's like when you give yourself permission to try something new. It's absolutely energizing, confidence-making, and motivating. Louise, bring us home.
Bring us home. Hang on. From the current slide. So yeah, here's one we made earlier. So we practiced what the same task. So from our experience, yes, stop making assumptions about your learners. So important. And tech can offer solutions. If you find that your learners have a lot lower basic literacy level than you think, use animation to help people register or sign on for a course. You know, things like that really make a difference. Start putting people and their context first, not the tech. Let's start with the person, start with the learners, really understand that problem. Tech comes way down the line. And yeah, continue being curious, learning, sharing, asking questions, coming to great events like this and sharing with your peers. So just to close, we've really enjoyed coming here today. I'm trying to find Sarah. Hey, Sarah. Yeah, sorry. And also Maureen, our colleague Maureen's at the back. But if you want to find out more about what we do as an organisation, and we have a really great online directory of the work that we funded, please do come and speak to us. We'd really love to continue the conversation with you, because you know we are a charity, but we absolutely we do fund commercial activity in companies, and we really understand that everyone has a role to play in making the change that we want to see. This is our our web address, and we're on Twitter and LinkedIn and all of that jazz at UFI Trust. So thank you for joining in. We've certainly learned a lot actually that's challenged our thinking, I think, as well. So thank you.
And thank you as well, Louise, Sarah, giving us these different examples. And thank you on the tables for getting involved and being accountable to each other about taking action. Now is the time for us to really go out and make a difference. And it's also now is the time for us to have some lunch. So enjoy, ask curious questions, learn from the people who are outside, continue the conversation, and then come back. And I'm actually back in here, I think, for the last session today. So if you've got the energy to keep up, I need you here. So I look forward to seeing you then. Take care.